Void fragments. You know those things you've been painfully and literally running in circles to stockpile? Well, it looks like in just a few days, with the upcoming update dropping on the 29th, your pain is coming to an end. Let's find out why.
Tux makes it exciting!
The new patch notes for Season 1 that's dropping on August 29th have been delivered. And there's lots of golden nuggets in these details. But the one I want to hone in on right now are the Void Fragment and Fusion Reactor loop improvements. That's because I know this has been plaguing a lot of the community. The devs have made several passes at this already, but I think this final one is going to close the subject. Let's take a look. So it says here, it has been improved so that playing Void Fragments once on hard difficulty now grants enough Void Shards to use the Fusion Reactor once. Consequently, the amount of Void Shards rewarded in special operations has also been increased. Additionally, Void Shards required for the Fusion Reactor have been consolidated into a single type. Now, the same type of Void Shards will drop from both Void Fragments and the Fusion Reactor within the same battlefield. This change enhances the convenience of farming Void Shards and optimizes the monster placement for representative Void Fragments of each attribute. I know some of this may sound confusing, so I'm going to break down each one of these changes mentioned and clarify what this means to you. And then it says, finally, the Fusion Reactor now requires Void Shards when using the reconstructed device rather than at the start of the mission. This adjustment ensures that Void Shards are not consumed if you accidentally enter the Fusion Reactor. All right, so let's unpack that.
Let's do this!
So I'm going to start off by going in depth on the current situation of the shards, the big problem. So you got organic, we have inorganic, polymer, and monomer. And they're really important and part of why this whole thing has been painful. So the reason why they're so important are because of these reactors. There's one typically in every battle zone. And you've probably been frequenting these because many of the elements or the patterns or the things that you're trying to get are specifically tied to defeating the boss at these fusion reactors. So for example, if we see that pattern 88 and 89 are specifically tied to this reactor. This is all related to the outpost. Yeah, so there's many layers to the system, right? So you have to go to this outpost and you got to farm at a 25% chance to get 88. And if you're using the sharing strategy, you have a 25% chance to get 89. That requires you to be stealth and hack the terminals. So you collect those. Then you head over here to the reactor to spend them by defeating the boss. He drops the fusion reactor, which you interact with. When you interact with the reactor, it's going to cost you void shards, and it tells you what void shards you need and how many. With this reactor, it's going to cost you 40 organic and 5 inorganic void shards every time you engage this fight. So now there's a third layer. We have to go get those shards. The primary way to acquire these has been through these void missions. So there are these elemental symbols are all over the map. So like here's another one, non-attribute one. Here's another electric one. Here's a fire one up here. They're basically an elimination thing. But the only way to interact with it is if you have a character that has that element or attribute type. For example, this is electric. So you have to have at least one bunny to engage with it and to complete it. Or it could be a Sharon, anybody with electric. If you're not running an electric descendant, then you won't get your shards. These can take from 1 minute to multiple minutes to complete, depending on which one and how many players are there with you. As it's currently set, you're gonna get 20 organic shards per completion and 3 inorganic shards per completion. On the surface, that might sound great, but the problem really is the quantity. So as you can see here, you need 40 to interact with this and 5 inorganic. So, but this is only delivering 20 per run. So that means 2 runs equals 1 engagement over here. Doesn't sound horrible, but when you have to fight this boss 13 times to get that one item, that means you got to run this 26 times to have enough time to do that. Well, maybe that doesn't sound bad to you. Well, you had to run this outpost maybe 50 times to get the 13 patterns you had to farm here. So these 3 things are just weighing down on the player base because that's just one thing you're farming. And almost everything in the game comes down to outposts. And so you have to have an outpost strategy. And that means many of you have been doing this loop. That's the current scenario. That's the pain. And so what everybody is trying to do is stack up on void shards so that they can do their void reactor farms. And so that means you're seeing people just running circles, running laps. The good news is that you can also XP your character and XP your weapons by doing so, but it's just a dull activity. Anytime you're running in circles over and over again, that's the path to Burnout City. For the long game, you want people to be spending more time playing the game than running laps on a track. So we talk about the elements and what makes a good looter shooter, and one of them is respecting the player's time, and this is a horrible example. So they have made some improvements where the outpost used to have the 5-minute cooldown. Now it's only got a 1-minute cooldown. So they're making progress. These bosses used to be a lot harder. Now they're relatively easy in the end game. And if it's not for you, you'll get there. So we're at the last piece of the puzzle, the shards. So let's take a closer look at their notes and then break down those changes and discuss how it's going to impact your end game.
Let's do this!
So let's look at their first point. It has now been improved so that playing void fragments once on hard difficulty now grants enough void shards to use the fusion reactor once. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio from what you're gonna earn to what you're gonna spend. Like I said earlier, you have to do this twice because it's only giving you 20 organic shards. So you have to do it twice to get 40 because that's how much this costs currently. It costs 40. So they're either gonna increase this to 40 per run or they're gonna drop this to 20. It doesn't really matter, it's the same thing. So now it's a 1-to-1 spend ratio. That's way better. So that right there cuts your void farming time in half. This one improvement is huge. Okay, let's look at the next point. Consequently, the amount of void shards rewarded in special operations has also been increased. Now, I feel like this is the nail in the coffin for the issue. And I can't stress this enough. So consider this a PSA because I'm not sure people have caught on to this yet. So I think it was like 2 patches ago that the devs buffed the amount of void shards 7x coming out of those special operations. We're talking about here, these are special operations. This is where I do most of my leveling. There's plenty of great ones though. It doesn't have to be this one. These are my favorite. These are all my favorite here in this corner. So when you kill NPCs randomly, they're gonna be dropping void shards all over the map. Now, some people haven't been impressed because they see that void shard and it's like 1. Right? You literally pick it up and it says 1 organic void shard. So they're onesie twosie and every now and again you'll get 3. And then when you kill a boss in there, you'll get somewhere between 16 and 24. Those aren't big numbers compared to what you're spending because every time you spend them, it's like 40. And so people haven't been impressed. So let's head over to my consumable stockpile here. These are big numbers. I'm not bragging. Okay. So I got 1,200, almost 2,000, on my way to 3,000, over 3,000. I stopped farming void shards a long time ago. And I don't do the bunny cave. It's not really my thing. All of these shards have been coming from those special operations. So they may not look like a lot, but boy, do they add up. I mean, it's been weeks since I've had to farm shards. And so you might be thinking I have a lot because I'm not spending, but I am. I mean, I have everything in the game that I want. Every single descendant has been unlocked. The ones you don't see here are being crafted. So I'm killing those void reactor bosses. I'm farming the hell out of them. I mean, some of them I'll go in there and farm them 15 times back to back. So that's 40 void shards plus the residuals every time I'm fighting that boss. And that's what I do. I spend more time at the reactors than I do at the Colossi fights. You don't have lobbies. You don't have loading screens. You can just boss kill, boss kill, boss kill. So I prefer that. And so my worries have been over for weeks ago because of special operations. Now the catch here is you have to enjoy special operations. So this is the 3rd increase in those special operations. That's a big win. If you're doing special operations, if you're one of those, you should never have to worry about shards. So consider special operations if they're your cup of tea. Okay, next bullet point. This is also a big impact. So additionally, void shards required for the fusion reactor have been consolidated into a single type. Now, the same type of void shards will drop from both void fragments and the fusion reactor within the same battlefield. Whatever you get here is going to be the same that you can spend here. Now, it just so happens to be the case here, but it's not always the case in the game. That's annoying. That means you have to go somewhere else to farm your shards and then come back to spend them. But now they've simplified the system, so instead of there being organic and inorganic, so 2 things you have to track, it's just going to be 1. So in this case, it'll likely be just organic. And then here's the last bullet point. It says, finally, the fusion reactor now requires void shards when using the reconstructed device. So the reconstructed device is that like Easter egg looking thing, right? So right now, the way it is that you're spending your shards in the beginning or when you interact with the boss. What sucks about that is if you're running with friends and if they don't have any patterns, but they're there for emotional support, well, they're spending their shards. Now, some of us have so many shards we don't really care, but that's wasteful. And it feels like they're being punished for helping or for playing in group. And sometimes it even happens on accident. So sometimes these void fights could be close to a mission, and that boss will enter that mission and everybody's forced to fight him all of a sudden. So now you can run in a group. So if only one player needs to crack open that pattern, their group can be there to support them, but not have to spend shards. And that's because it requires you to interact and then crack open a pattern or shape it in order to spend those shards. So saving people resources, but also saving people time, because now they can invite their friends to help them along and clear those bosses, those harder ones, even faster. So this is all happening in just a few days. This is 7 days out from the time I'm making this video. So that should cut down on the grind a little bit. There's still lots of other things that need to be improved, but as you can see here, the devs are listening and making strides. Let's keep that ball rolling. Thank you for hanging out with me. My name is Tuxedo Bandido. That's Tito Bandido.
One and only.
And this was another episode of The First Descendant. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications to ensure you don't miss out on the fantastic experiences waiting for you in The First Descendant. And if you like videos like this, check out the one I have recommended for you right here. If you have anything you want to see covered, be sure to let me know in the comments below. And thank you to all the channel members and donors who make everything possible. Tux Nation wouldn't be without you.
When you buy or download anything for The First Descendant, be sure to use Tux's creator code to support the channel. Easy peasy.
Follow me.